And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We are here to chat approximately 10 minutes after the end of the Gold Cup final about the USMNT summer, the tournament, players, what we can take from it, all those sorts of things. It is not the result anybody wanted, but it's also not the result many people weren't expecting. So we'll talk about all of that and more on this episode. Connor, how you doing? How you feeling after that one?
I am very tired and ready for bed.
Oh my Lord, you are 95 years old, I swear.
Kind of like Tim Ream will be when in our back line in the 2096 World Cup.
Oh man, listen, we've done a lot of Gold Cup content this summer, and we've talked a lot about. I mean, let's do Scarf of the Week really quick. I know you've got one you want to show off, so go right ahead real quick.
I just grabbed the first one I could find.
Oh my
I don't
Lord.
know if I've showed this one, but I got a little
You,
Portland Timbers scarf here. A little
that
confetti you
applies to
looking thing.
absolutely nobody. So good
Yep.
job. No, nobody on Mexico. That if this was a Canada USA final, maybe, but I got the US Copa America scarf. Okay, really back into it now. We've done a lot of Gold Cup content. We talked about players who rose their stock through friendlies and through the first kind of couple games. I guess I'll just ask you really briefly before I get into some of the new topics. Did anything change there? Did you see anybody you weren't expecting a lot out of take a step forward? Did you see anybody take steps back? Things like that in terms of individual players.
You're talking about just this last game.
Just in during the summer in general. 'Cause we only talked about it up into the first game of the group against Trinidad. So we haven't talked about Saudi Arabia, we haven't talked about Costa Rica, we haven't talked about Haiti, and we haven't talked about this game. So
Well, I think the first person I'd point out, I think Chris Richards is absolutely, if it wasn't clear before, he is very clearly center back one, and by like a large margin. He is far and away the best. I don't want to say defender because Anthony Robinson is also amazing, but Chris Richards is clearly center back one, and at this point, so long as he is healthy, the rest of the year up until the World Cup is just finding out who's going to be his partner for that. Uh, I think, outside of us losing this game, he was fantastic tonight. He was the goal scorer. Plus, I think he was doing a really good job defensively. And really like, I'll get more into it later, but I think he was bailing Freeman out a lot tonight, and doing a lot of cleanup there. So I think he did a really fantastic job. Another person I don't think would be in World Cup contention, but I think Sebastian Berhalter did enough here to keep himself in the conversation for making more USMNT appearances in the future. He seems to be a very like dangerous set piece player for us. I mean, that again showed tonight. Um, I don't think he really was like doing much wrong tonight. I think he, did the role that he was asked to do, and he provided that moment of magic that we needed at the start of the game. So, um, you know, I think good stuff, generally good stuff across the tournament for him. And then I would say the last one for me, Matt Freese, I think definitely is forced his way into the conversation for a spot, not only a spot in the World Cup, but maybe even like an outside shot for starter. Like he really, I think that might be a little bit of a stretch. I think that's really going to come down to form and game time again. Like I think goalkeeper similar to striker in that regard. But I mean, I think Freese did a good job throughout the entire tournament, especially in that PK shootout that we went a couple games back. But I think he's done enough to at least keep him in the conversation for a World Cup team, or I guess put him in one. He wasn't really in the conversation before this, so he's definitely been a big benefactor of this tournament, almost kind of mirroring what Matt Turner did a couple of Gold Cups ago when we won it.
yeah, I didn't want to spend too much time on it. I don't think that there's anybody who really put their stock down to the point where it's like, oh yeah, they can't, especially in this last game. I'm thinking about the last game, like, oh yeah, we can't bring them around. I think everybody up here showed that they at least were low level national team quality. I think, we talked about Nathan Harriel being way out of it. And maybe Max Darson being in the wrong position for what they're asking him to do. But everybody else I thought was fine. I'm not sure Matt Freese is in the number one conversation. I think you backtrack that, and that's acceptable because I'm not sure. He just doesn't have the makings of a number one to me yet.
That's
Fantastic,
fair. Yeah.
fantastic overall goalkeeper. Like he's got all of the tools, but they haven't all quite come together yet, right? He makes the mistakes we don't want to see him making as a number one. And Matt Turner did the same thing. I still think we have a problem at the goalkeeper spot. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I like Seb Burhalter. I mentioned it in our Twitter conversations today. Was this dude woke up and said, I'm going to play myself into the World Cup conversation today. He was fantastic. Not only just the set pieces, but his ball recovery, his discipline in pressing when he was in this new shape, this 4-4-2 as a right midfielder. I mean, it was really, really nice to watch him play. The problem was he got very, very tired towards the end, and he gave away a couple balls that probably are now going to make all of USMNT Twitter be like, oh, MLS, can't have him. So I don't see anybody who played themselves out, but I also don't necessarily see anybody who played themselves into a lock-on spot. I think Diego Luna has a lot of really good qualities, and I think that he's very close. And that's not including the Tillmans and the Richards, who I think already have a spot there, right? But I don't think Luna nailed on a spot. I think he's going to probably make it. I don't know if he's nailed on a spot just yet because a lot of his greater performances were against the lesser teams, right? Um, which is fine, right? He no problem at all. But let's chat a little bit about this game, right? So we go in and what a flyer of a start, right? So a free kick from Sebastian Berhalter falls onto the head of Chris Richards and nods it off the bar and in to give us the lead with the earliest goal in Gold Cup final history. What were you thinking at that moment? How were you feeling?
I mean, it felt exactly like what we need. I mean, you look at the two teams lined up on the field, and listen, I'm not a Mexico national team expert, but I recognize a few names, and it felt like Mexico's A team plus a 16-year-old against like our couple of A-ish team guys and a bunch of like C team level players. So like you had to imagine we were going to be on the back foot most of the game. Like just talent wise, they are more talented on the field. So to get the early goal, I think was massive in terms of setting us up in a position where we can now try and defend a bit more. I'm not saying just completely park the bus for 86 minutes. I think that would be a nightmare, even though it's kind of like what they almost immediately went into. But it was still exactly the start that you need when you were kind of like, I would say the lesser team talent wise on paper, like going into the game.
Yeah, like I said you're flying high at that point, and you've got Mexico on the back on their back heels, which is crazy, right? That's not something I was going to expect. But then you saw this was a game that the U.S. did not have the ball at all. I mean, they played a game. I mean, they played how many games before this, and the majority of the time they were in possession. They were setting themselves up to build through the lines, and it was very, very calm and collected. And this Mexico team put them straight under pressure, and you could tell that they felt the pressure, right? And I think that's one of the things that Pat Odgman did really well this game was his hold up play to release that pressure and not just turn it into a clearance and a turnover was really, really helpful, right? His hold up play led to that first goal, and then he drew three or four more fouls in the first half alone. I'm actually looking up his stats here really quick just to see what he finished with, but he was a nightmare for these defenders. Yeah, he drew five fouls and he won six of nine or nine of 15 duels. I mean, the dude was really, really strong in a very interesting system for the team. But then you come down and again, the passage of play that led to Mexico's goal was very nice, right? The pattern that they went through to play through the lines, the reverse pass to split the back line. You got to tip your hat to it, right? It wasn't a fluke. You got to tip your hat to it. They level the game, and at that point, we go in at 1-1, and you're sitting here thinking, okay, it's our, we're not really in the game, but we're not out of it either, right? So let me just fast forward to kind of the big talking points, right? You get halfway through the second half, Max Darfson finally getting involved in the attacking half, goes to do a step over against a guy in the Mexico box. Guy trips, hand goes straight on top of the ball, stops it dead in its track. He picks up the ball and starts dribbling again. Referee says, "Play on." Penalty for you?
I don't even know what the definition of a handball is anymore, to be honest with you. Like, I understand in some circumstances that you're not going to call a penalty if it's like, his arm's down by his side and it's like it just happened to go off of it. Like, clearly he was not making himself bigger. But like I mean I don't think he intentionally was like I'm gonna grab the ball and stop it. But like at the same time he like if his hand is not there, he's not touching the ball. So like clearly he you know expanded his range by like landing on the ball with his hand. I mean I think I am leaning more towards saying that it's a penalty, but I'm not like I really don't know the rules. Maybe the rules is kind of are kind of dumb, but maybe it does say in the rules that like, he has no intention of like touching the ball with his hand, so there's like no penalty there. But I mean, it looked pretty blatant.
Yeah. So I was reading that too. The definition that came up was when you're falling down, your plant hand or your brace hand is considered a natural movement. So therefore it wouldn't be brought into the idea of handling, right? But the problem is he gains an advantage from it, right? The ball is rolling away from him, and I don't know, I don't think there's any USMNT player around, right? I'm not saying that he's going to prevent a goal scoring opportunity, but the ball is rolling away from him. He puts his hand on it, stops it from moving, then picks it up and starts dribbling again. That's the definition of gaining an advantage, right? So I'm not sure, maybe legally, yeah, maybe legally, not a pen, but you're right. We need to just have a straight definition of if the ball hits you between your finger here and your the bottom of your shoulder right here, handball. Doesn't matter what happens. Just call it. I don't care because it's getting and I'm not saying this because Red Bull, goodness, USMNT didn't get something good out of this, but it is just getting annoying in the world of in the world of football, right? And then right down the field, right, they come back and they get a free kick, which we can talk about the referee all day long, giving the softest fouls in the world to Mexico, and then letting every USMNT player get hacked to the floor without giving a penalty or a foul. But he gives a free kick on the outside. He gets flicked on, and Edson Alvarez, one of the best players in CONCACAF right now, is kept onside by Alex Freeman and nods home to go level or to take the lead rather, and that's pretty much it. We pressed to the end of the game, but had a chance at the end where Tim Ream plays a ball over the top and Patrick Ajman runs onto it, but the space gets closed down, and we end losing the game. And I kind of said it before. I didn't expect us to walk away from this game with a 3-0 easy win, but losing sucks. That's kind of where I'm at with it. What about you?
Yeah, I mean losing sucks, but like I mean when you take in the full context of it, it like Mexico with their top team, generally top team here, really, I know they dominated the game, but like in terms of clear-cut chances, their two goals were really the only ones. Like they had a lot of the ball, and I think the US, generally speaking, had a very good defensive shape, and the defensive shape just broke down for like just very bad times where guys just switched off and both of the goals, the whole back line was in line for offside trap, except for one guy who held them on both times. So, outside of those two moments where two guys just kind of like switched off and weren't in line with the rest of the back line, I feel like the defensive shape was really good. The problem was like you could not retain any possession. It was like the minute the ball went to Tillman or Luna, it was just immediately a turnover. Like the guys just could not find Pat. They could not find anybody else. They did not do well with the ball under pressure and would constantly turn the ball over. So then everybody has to reset back, you know, buckle down deep again in your own area and play defense for the next 5 minutes while Mexico is passing the ball around, looking for crosses into the box to find Jimenez. So I feel like the idea was there, and I think the idea was done well. Like I'm not gonna sit here and like praise Pochettino to the end of the earth because like at the end of the day we still lost. So there's probably some things he could have maybe done better to make it a bit more of a better chance for us to win. But I think generally speaking, I don't think the game plan was a bad idea, especially because like I said before, the U.S. team I think was a mismatch of talent against this Mexico team.
It just felt so. All right, coaching hat on, right? So I liked in the build out this 4-4-2 block, right? Sebastian Berhalter goes out wide, Tillman goes up as a second striker, and you saw that it caused problems for Mexico in their build out. They couldn't figure out how to break it down because they were so used to going up the side. Right, they were so used to playing with teams that had two wide players that kind of stayed high to pressure the outside backs. They just let their center mids kind of drift out into the wide areas, or their wide players drop in. They picked up the ball in those wide areas, and they created in those moments. Now they struggled with that, but the problem was once they did break that down, Berhalter tucked himself inside to play more as a center midfielder. Well, that left Alex Freeman one on one with whoever was out there, and he was having to deal with a whole bunch of stuff. Same deal with Max Arston, who we know is not a strong defender and did not do well in that phase of the game. All I mean, for all tournament, right? He was struggling all tournament. So much so that Diego Luna, one of our more creative attacking players, was being called back and back and back to defend inside, his own 18 more often than he was in the other team's half, right? And that's what happens when you go up against a team with the quality of Mexico, right? It's, especially Mexican's first team, right? At the end of the day, there are a lot of things that you can take from this, and that's maybe let's transition into that, right? Like, what did this tournament do for you to, I'll say, calm your nerves? Like when you come into the tournament, you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on with X, Y, and Z. How did you feel about this show?
I mean, I think people may disagree with me on this one, but it's one of the things that really helped me calm some nerves about this, even though like you're gonna look back at the results and be like, okay, you played like teams you should be beating, and it wasn't exactly like you made it easy. Like there were a lot of close games in those matches, but I mean, one of the things that I really felt like I saw for the first time in a while was hunger from these guys again. Like it felt like, the guys that were on the field were out there playing for something, as opposed to like I know I'm gonna be here, so I'm just gonna show up and be here. But it felt like, like Tillman, it felt like he was playing for a spot in the starting 11 for the World Cup. Luna's playing for a spot in the World Cup roster. It felt like Berhalter, same thing. Pat Ajimong, maybe he's playing for that move that he just got over to Europe. Like, Freese, same thing. Freese is playing for a shot at the World Cup. Like, it felt like the guys out there, it felt like they were hungry. It felt like they wanted it just felt like they wanted it more than like we've seen from the team in, the recent friendlies and Copa America. Like it felt a lot more like 2014 USA again, and not exactly to that level. Like that's going to be very tough to match. Like those guys were just mentality monsters. Like they were just different beasts when it came to that stuff on the field. It felt a little bit more like that than it has in past games. That made me like feel some hope again for the team. Maybe you bring in the right guys to inspire the rest of them to kind of get that mentality because imagine you have like the quality of players that our first team, our A team typically has, but then you give them this mentality of this hunger to like, want to be on top. Like it would be a great combination. That's like you can hit that level. That's the US team that I think could make a run in the World Cup.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well put. You definitely saw these guys who, and again, I'm using Sebastian Berhalter because we've just recently watched the game, but he showed up and was like, I'm going to play myself onto the World Cup roster. Diego Luna, I'm gonna play myself onto the World Cup roster, right? These guys showing up and saying, I am going to do this was really nice to see. Like you said, instead of having, oh, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. I also enjoyed watching players like Malik Tillman step up and be more of a leader in the group, right? I feel like a lot of times when he's with the first team, he just is there, right? He's just another number. Where here it's okay. We got to see the best of him, and again, maybe not necessarily under the most strenuous circumstances, but we got to see the best of him. Got to see different players as well. Some players, and we've mentioned them already, have played themselves into consideration. I don't think anybody's a lock anymore, but I think they played themselves into consideration. And that was nice to see because for a while, I think a lot of us were just like, oh, yeah, this is the team, right? And we talked about it last time we talked about the Gold Cup. If you don't have the pressure of the guys behind you and you just think you're always there, then your level drops, right? So I think it's another good thing to see. But I'll ask you, what do you think is the biggest worry that you still leave this tournament with?
I think the back line is still a little bit of a question mark for me. I think there's really good pieces in there. I think Anthony Robinson's obviously a lock in at left back. He's genuinely one of, I'd say he's probably a top maybe 10 left back in the world right now. Like he's doing phenomenally well. Chris Richards has really come into his own into the back line. But I worry about Tim Ream. I worry about him just continuously getting older. I know he brings good leadership and everything, but at some point we have to move on and bring in somebody else to be Richard's partner. The right back spot, I mean, I feel like Dest is constantly in and out of the USMNT team, whether with injuries or suspensions or whatnot. Obviously, he's very talented, but I really wonder what this back line is going to look like and what our best back line would be because there were moments tonight where I feel like they there were a lot of moments where I think they were good and they did a really good job in defensive shape, but then there were just a couple moments where they switched off and like we can't be doing that in World Cup games when you have so little opportunities. I mean, I take a lot of positives away from it. I don't really have too many negatives. I mean, I think the increased competition for spots in the World Cup roster is obviously going to be a good thing. It's going to push, like you said, it's going to push people to work harder, play harder, be hungrier. I don't even necessarily think I don't think Poch had like a bad tournament. You could make the argument if you're saying that he didn't necessarily have a good one, but I mean he got us to the final where I think on paper we were definitely the team on the outside looking in for the shot at the title here. So I mean you could say he kind of did what he was supposed to do in this tournament. So I don't even necessarily like have negatives for him.
I disagree. I think that's my biggest thing is I don't think he knows this team yet. I watched this game. Malik Tillman took a knock 60 minutes into the game. I don't remember the exact time, but it was very clear he was nursing something, right? He wasn't moving at full pace. He wasn't he was still putting in relative effort, but you saw that as everybody else is working, he kind of was, it felt like he was taking plays off. Not all of them, but some of them because he had something going on. And I don't know if Poch knew who the next guy up was. I mean, I had Jack McGlynn sitting on the bench, I had Brendan Aronson sitting on the bench, and Quinn Sullivan sitting on the bench, and not a single one of them got called until the 86th minute. That's worrying to me, right? And now you're going to go into another tournament with guys that you've only seen 3 times outside of the club team, and now you got to figure out your sub pattern there. That's worrying to me, right? I'm not so sure that he's got a good understanding of what the team is yet, which I don't blame him for, right? Because he got hired in, halfway through a cycle and he doesn't get a lot of games because we're hosting the World Cup. It's a big challenge. I get it. But it worries me that we're going to get into a game where he's got to figure out, okay, what's next? And his rotation is going to be, well, I've seen this guy play 3 times, or I've seen that guy play 2 times. I guess we'll just toss him on and see what happens. Because even, I mean, you watched when he subbed those players in the 86th minute change after the goal. Or no, was it the Downs change? It might have been the Downs change in the 70th minute. The players had no idea what was going on. Right? You had Tyler Adams calling over the bench like, "What are we doing? Like what's the shape? Where are we supposed to be playing?" He didn't verbalize that well, and that could be on Downs coming in too, not telling his teammates where to go, but they played the 2 minutes before the ball went out and they could, reshape completely out of whack. And just those little moments you get away with in things like the Gold Cup. Now, we didn't win the game, but in that moment, it didn't hurt us. But you get to the knockouts of a World Cup and you go up against a team like the Netherlands, like we did in 2022. I mean, you can't get away with that sort of stuff. So I'm just worried that he doesn't have enough time to understand fully what this group is going to be for him. That's a relative worry for me.
I definitely agree with you on the substitutions. I think across a few games he was definitely very slow to bring them on. But I think the thing that is a little bit promising is hopefully, he can take this as a lesson and, learn from it, kind of like, do better going forward. I think a criticism he got after the Costa Rica game was waiting too long to do the subs. And it kind of came again back again today in the Mexico game, but I believe in the next game he made subs much earlier on against Guatemala. So like hopefully he can like take, learn from things and take criticism instead of just being so headstrong to just like this is the way I'm going to do things. It's either going to work or it's not going to work. Hopefully he's a little bit more flexible. I think the promising thing for me is I feel like it felt like we figured things out a little bit more tactically than we had previously.
Sure.
Like you said, I think going with a 4-4-2 shape was a good recognition that like Freeman and Arvston needed help defensively on the wings. They were just on both sides, they were getting overrun. And by going with the 4-4-2, you're giving them more help. Obviously, now that gives you some other issues like building out. when you have like your two. It really just gives you two people up top to kind of like hold up or win a foul or kind of like keep maintain some possession for you as opposed to like maybe three or four. But it was necessary in my opinion. I think, and maybe that comes down to him calling in the wrong players. Like maybe you're right in that he just doesn't have a good understanding of his player personnel. But hopefully we just use it as a learning opportunity. That's the biggest hope for me. And I guess it'll come down to like how we're looking in friendlies coming up for the next year.
Yeah, yeah, and only time will tell, so we won't dive too much into that. But another one I've got, I'm worried that our personnel still isn't good enough. I'm not sold on the goalkeeper spot. Center back two is not nailed down, and a lot of the depth pieces are not there yet, right? Still don't know who the striker is going to be, right? I don't think Pat, Brian White, or Downs played themselves into consideration for the starting spot. Maybe Pat played himself into striker three. We've had that conversation already, and I don't think any of that's changed today. I think he got himself into a better spot today, truthfully, than he did before. I thought his hold up play was great, regardless of what any of these annoying ass USMNT Twitter accounts say. They are complete. I don't think they've ever played soccer in their life. They don't understand the game at all. I've seen people, and again, I'm not naming names because I'm not giving people free clout, but I've seen people after Pat Odgeman draws his fifth foul of the game complain that he's on the ground too much. He's on the ground because he's drawing fouls. You stupid people. But anyways, he's not a starter, right? So and this is the thing is like everybody thinks that the person who's there needs to be the starting guy, right? Pat is not a starting striker. He doesn't have the finished product yet. He's not scored like he had moments to score goals in big moments and he failed, right?
He had it today.
He had it today. It wasn't good enough. But to sit here and be like, he is the worst person to put on a USMNT jersey ever because he's on the ground after playing hold up. First of all, anybody ever try to play hold up against a proper physical center back understands how tiring that stuff is. And that dude worked for 90 plus minutes to get in the box and get his stuff done. And you're upset because he's on the ground. Stupid. Just so like the level of who was it? Was it there was one Ellis maybe from the women's team who's like, yeah, most U.S. fans don't actually know this game very well. Prime example right here, right? Call out the fans; they don't know nothing. Um, but the problem is we don't have that finished product yet. Pat might be in the conversation. Sure, Darby's going to be a big factor of that, right? But the big problem for me is the depth, right? I'm worried that when our players get tired, the next person up, we either have seen them play and they're not good enough, right? So I think about the left back spot. You got Anthony Robinson and who, right? Tolkien wasn't it. Arston's not it. Wiley didn't even get a look, which he hasn't played a lot, so I'm not upset with that. Um, right. And then you've got somebody like Joe Scally. Well, Joe Scally's played how many times at left back for the national team has been poor. So what's your next option? Tim Ream at 38 years old at left back? Yeah, no, thank you. Right. So I'm not sure what that answer is. Right. Let's talk about the right back side. Right. You've got Serginho Dest if he's healthy, Joe Scally, but again, we just talked about Joe Scally. Alex Freeman, I thought was good. Is he a starting? Is he a guy who I would trust at the World Cup right now? I'm not sure. Right. I haven't seen enough of him. I think he's great at the MLS level. Right. I think he's done very, very well. But I see people online again calling for him never to come back again. I'm like, he was great this tournament. He had moments where he wasn't good. Dude's 20 years old. Of course he's having his moments. That's what happens. But I don't know. Like I wouldn't mind him being a second right back on this team, but I don't know if we needed to call upon him if he could be up for the job. I'm not sure. Right? Center mid wide open. I think Berhalter did well. Where does Luna fit in? Is Luna going to be one of those wide midfielders over a pool? What's it look like? Pulisic, Weah. You got all these options. If they're all healthy, does Luna get in? And if he does, is he at the level? I'm not sure. Right. So that's my big worry is did our depth show enough? I don't think they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's concerns in certain spots. Unfortunately, it's key spots too. Um, like you said, striker's kind of a little bit of a question mark. I mean, I think Balogun, assuming he's healthy, probably at least gets on the team. I mean, I
Yeah.
think he has the starting spot and it's his to lose. But I think striker two, there's a lot of guys in and around, and guys have been in and out of the USMNT, which makes me feel a little bit better because then you could just go with the hot hand going in. Who's been tearing it up this last year, who's like going to be a good option to bring in, who's been playing super well. Um, and you've got guys who have been around, so they maybe are a bit more familiar. And then I do honestly like the option of bringing Pat as a third striker. Again, not as a striker, not as a starter, like you had said, but like name for me another guy who's going to be able to come into a game late if the US is winning and really be able to be a hold up guy for you to kind of help kill off these defensive like stints that the US is going to have to do. I don't think there's a striker that's going to do it quite like Pat could do it. You know, you don't bring him on because you're like, I mean, maybe you bring him on because you need a goal, but I don't think the goal is like you bring him on because you're down 2-1 and you're looking for a goal. I think that's when you go for striker two. But if you've got the lead, I think Pat is the best probably in the striker pool of like, I'm going to be physical, hold up the ball, help you win fouls, kind of kill off the tempo of the game if you're winning. I think that's absolutely an important person to bring on. I definitely agree with you. The fullback depth is looking pretty poor. I think the goalkeeper is the biggest worry for me.
Mhm.
It felt good for a period of time with Stefan and Turner, and I really feel like both of them have taken significant steps backwards. And I don't necessarily think people caught up to them. I almost feel like they fell down to that level. And I am very much concerned for what the goalkeeper spot is going to look like. And I mean, hopefully we can ride a hot hand and go into the World Cup with that. But that's the position I feel most worried for. I think we'll figure out center back too. And I trust with Richards and Anthony Robinson that whoever it is at center back too will end up being good enough that like if there are some mistakes, maybe those two can help cover. And if we have Tyler Adams too.
Yeah, I can't. I'm not so sure I can put my finger on anybody who I'd like to be the starting goalkeeper. I mean, really, I would love to see a healthy Zach Steffen, right? I mean, really playing well in league, and we saw the moments that he has at the national team, right? He when he gets called upon, he does play well because he's got a good consistent run of form. So I'd love to see him get shots in this friendly coming up because I don't think Matt Turner's it. I'm not sold on Freeze. I'm not, right? And I was along, last year when I'm like, I can't believe he's not getting looks, right? I think he is a raw talent, Matt Freeze, right? Comes through, great shot stopper, decent at controlling his area, but has those moments where he's just not there yet, right? And you can't do that at the national team level. You just can't. So I guess the last thing that I'll ask before we wrap this thing up here, I'm seeing a lot of comments about how we should take this Gold Cup result with a grain of salt because it was our B/C team against Mexico's A/B+, A-, whatever team. Your thoughts on that conversation? Do you think that's a legitimate thing? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you gotta take positives out of it. I don't, like obviously we want to win at the end of the day, right? Like that would have been the cherry on top of you would call 100% a good tournament. I still think you could take plenty of positives out of this, even with losing to a team who has more of their normal starters out there for you. I think, as we talked about before, there was really good hunger shown from this team. I'm really hoping that it's gonna like push other guys in the that are already kind of like in this World Cup roster to be hungry as well. Like want to go out there and win and be better than everybody else on the field. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's not the mentality that they have, but it doesn't really feel like that's the mentality they show on the field. And I'd like to see them show that more. So, I think winning would have been nice. I'm kind of in agreement, honestly. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, it's fine because we lost and they were the better team on paper. But I think my focus is mainly on like, here's a bunch of good things we could take out of this. Here are some new faces now that we can hopefully maybe see pushing to get a spot on the team and maybe pushing people to work harder as well. People that already had a spot.
So I was a guy who was like, oh yeah, it's a BC team, don't really care. I am starting to get away from that a little bit. I am kind of getting tired of this. It feels like an excuse, right? Oh, we don't have to worry about it because these guys don't matter anyway, right? And that mentality does seep into the players, right? And you see these guys that are like, oh yeah, I can take the time off because this is just the C team. So no matter what the results are, I still have my spot safe, right? In the same vein, the players on the field, who some of them, yes, are fighting hard for their spot. Some of them are like, oh yeah, well, it doesn't really matter because this is still just a C team and I can't move up anyway. that narrative, I think, needs to go away. And I don't know what the tone was in the locker room, if it was more of a developmental thing, if it was more of a, see what you can do with this, blah, 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 because I think that'd be poor coaching, but I'm not going to come out and say that's what he did. But I do think that we, as a community, and when talking about this team, need to get away from this idea of it's a B team, it's a C team. It doesn't, if we had our A team, we would have been better. Because it sets this narrative of, while there do exist levels of ability, it sets this narrative of, oh yeah, this is just where you're at, so it doesn't actually matter, right? And again, I'm not hanging my hat on this idea of like the Gold Cup is the gold standard to telling us how good we are. It's the Gold Cup, right? But at the end of the day, if we're going to be a team that says we want to win everything and we're going to go out there and fight for everything, then we need to get rid of this idea that, oh, it's a C team, we don't care, you know. And I'm holding my hand up saying I was one of those people who did that, and I'm changing my tone.
I think we have to be like somewhat realistic too. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. But like at the end of the day too, we have to just be a little realistic that like, if these guys are generally their starters, they're gonna have more chemistry together than the guys we've kind of just thrown together for the first time ever to play on the field together. And talent wise, like if you look at who scored for Mexico, it's Raul Jimenez and it's Edson Alvarez, both of whom are like Premier League level talent and have been for a while now. Like if you look on the US side, it's Chris Richards and maybe Malik Tillman that are that like quality. And so I feel like there is genuinely like there is a conversation to be had that like the quality is better from the Mexico team than there is the US team. And I think that's obviously we want to win and I don't want players to get complacent because it's like, oh, like they're better, whatever. Like we played them hard. Like I think there was a quote mentioned from Poch that they talked about on the broadcast where he said, it doesn't matter how well you played in a final if you lost. You're only going to be remembered as a loser.
Hmm.
So like I think that's a good mentality to have, and I hope he sticks with that. And like even if, I think there are good things to take out of this, but I still like I want this to like be a driver for even more hunger for these guys to want to come back and take the game to the next level. Like even these guys, it's a good opportunity for us to develop our depth more than we have already. Take that next level, get a little bit more comfortable in these tougher games. So hopefully it did that.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I now need to ask you one more question because our favorite series of accounts, people with USMNT in their handle and then a bunch of letters after, are all banding together to scream "Potch out" because you lost the Gold Cup. Your thoughts? Shall we go for a third manager in this cycle for the 2026 World Cup?
Don't even bother. Just block them and move on already. It's just it's like you said.
It's
It's just a bunch of
oh
it's a very bird brain take to like have in this situation. Like you're a year, regardless of what you think, you're a year out from the World Cup. You're gonna bring in, like you said, a third coach now, and we're gonna reset it all 1 year out from the World Cup. Like, come on, be realistic here for a second. Like, just use that last remaining brain cell you have for like half a second, and then you could let it rest again and just think about how dumb of a move that would be to just fire your coach a year out from the World Cup. Just let him do what he has to do at this point and work with the data that he has and what he's seen from players so far. And I mean, it's too late at this point. You just have to stick with what you have here.
one of my favorite things about being a former athlete in this game is that I learned to get humbled really quick about what I know and what I think I know, right? When I got into coaching after being a player, I walked in and I was like, I played in college. Easy. I got this coaching thing down. And every day I walk off the field, I'm like, I don't know anything. I need to go back and go back and redo everything. I don't know anything. I call people up, I ask questions, I try and learn. And then I come onto Twitter and I'm like, oh, I'm not stupid. Stupid's on Twitter. I'm okay because I know at the very least that I can analyze a game without going onto Twitter and falling into this mind hive of if you do not play in Europe, you are bad. If you do not play in Europe, you are bad. Um, being able to just too funny. But yeah, no, let's not sack our coach for a home World Cup a year before the World Cup. So I'm with you on that. But anything else you wanna hit here? Or are you ready for bed, old man?
Oh, I'm so ready for bed.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. This is probably going to be the end of our USMNT coverage for a little bit, which, trust me, I'm not upset with. So, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you shared some good thoughts with us. We will be back on Wednesday with the top 10, and then on Monday with some Club World Cup final thoughts before moving on from there. So, thanks so much for listening. Make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts. The next time we go live, all on social media, so you can interact with us and get a good taste of USMNT Twitter, because I think everybody needs a good little bit of that in their life. Um, and yeah, thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.